Many beginning law students feel very nervous about being called upon in class. They're not accustomed to the Socratic method of questioning. They're thrown by the sheer size of the class because they've grown used to the seminar-sized classes more common at the college level. For some, this anxiety is so acute that their minds go blank as soon as their names are called. Even if you feel a milder sort of anxiety when called upon in class, you can begin to overcome this fear in a counterintuitive way by raising your hand and volunteering to speak. The key is to prepare a question or comment in advance that is related to a case, statute, or rule that you've been assigned to study. The question can be very concrete. If the plaintiff wanted to give the defendant notice by attaching land, would the plaintiff also post a sign somewhere on the land itself? Or it could be abstract. What does the court mean when it says blank? You could also use your question to tie two or more cases together. Is the court's conception of possession in this case more demanding than we saw yesterday in the case of X? To do this properly, you should actually write the question down. At home, on the night before class, you should practice speaking the question out loud to make sure you can articulate as clearly as possible what you want to say. It can be scary to raise your hand and ask a question or make a comment, but when you do so, you're in charge of what you're going to say, instead of being forced to respond to a question chosen by the professor. And some professors will not call on you or ask you as many questions when they do if you volunteered recently. Second, learn to become comfortable with silence, both before and after you speak. One of the most powerful tools when taking a deposition is to utilize the discomfort that most people have with silence. If a lawyer asks a deponent, "Tell me all the ways your parenting style may have been flawed or misguided," the deponent will give an initial answer, but just by waiting and letting silence fill the room, the lawyer can sometimes cause the deponent to add additional words that he or she wasn't planning on saying. When a professor asks you a question, listen to the question and first and foremost be responsive. And after you've said what you wanted to say, stop speaking and be comfortable with letting silence ensue. If you're asked a yes-no question, there's something particularly clean and lawyerly by simply responding yes or no, or even it depends, and nothing more. Trust the professor to follow up and ask you why, or it depends on what. As I've emphasized in my lecture on responsiveness, you'll get extra points in the professor's mind regardless of whether your answer is correct or incorrect, just by tracking the question and responding to it succinctly. I routinely ask my students to intentionally give a wrong answer sometime during the semester in class without telling me or their fellow students when they are fulfilling the assignment. In addition, I sometimes email students in advance of class calling upon them to give a particular wrong answer to a particular question. I do this to intentionally make it harder for others in the class and for me to tell whether a particular incorrect answer was intentional or unintentional. Students quickly learn that the world doesn't come to an end if they or a fellow classmate answer incorrectly. If you find yourself really stressing out about participating in class, you might try a 10 or 16-week course in cognitive behavioral therapy, which has been shown in randomized trials to have great success in helping people overcome their fear of public speaking. You might also enlist your professor's help in becoming more comfortable in class participation. Most professors, if asked outside class, would be happy to help you develop a graduated program of slowly escalating participation. For example, you might agree to begin by making a comment prepared in advance about a particular case. Then the professor might warn you that he or she was going to ask you a particular question in class about an upcoming case. Then the professor might warn you that he would be calling upon you to answer a question about an upcoming case without telling you what the question would be. After this kind of warm-up, you might be ready for cold calling without any warning. Finally, here's a bonus tool that might be pulled out in emergency. If you're asked how you think a case should be decided, and you don't have a clue about how to answer, you might pause, rub your chin, and then say, to answer that question, I think we should ask ourselves what outcome the future parties are rooting for. Or more simply, we should ask ourselves, who are the future parties rooting for? Unquote. Desperate times sometimes call for ending a sentence with a preposition. I claim that there's a good chance your professor, in hearing this, who are the future parties rooting for answer, that your professor will be impressed. So what the heck does the answer mean? Well, it's tied to the discussion in both my ex ante, ex post lecture and my veil of ignorance lecture. The future parties are in the ex ante position with regard to the dispute in question, while ex post, the suit being filed, plaintiffs and defendants are naturally in the opposition. They're in the ex post position. But ex ante, there's likely to be more agreement about what outcome is efficient and equitable. After the fact, a car company may not want to be held liable for a defective gasoline tank. But ex ante, there's a better chance that car manufacturers generally would support regulation that's going to make it easier for them to sell cars. Answering a normative question by asking who or what the future parties are rooting for is a way not only to impress your professor and buy some time, but it hopefully will lead you under follow-up questioning to make an argument about what the future parties would likely agree to, about what from the ex ante perspective is efficient and equitable way to resolve disputes of this kind.